Hello and welcome to 3 Hot Things with HP Service Manager 9 and ITSM. My name is Mary Kay Peterson. I'm a co-chapter leader of Vivid HP Service Manager SIG. And today's session is brought to you by HP. Presenting today is Chuck Darst, who is ITSM Product Marketing for HP, Pat DeMartine, who's the Director of ITSM Products, Edward Mata, a software engineer with HP, Renee Zavala, a systems and software engineer, and Casey Kunzmana, a senior technical consultant. Since this is a recorded event, we are able to share with you the prize winners. We have a $100 gift certificate, American Express gift certificate, going to Jay from Morrison's in the UK, and also Leon from U.S. Bank in the United States. Congratulations on winning a certificate. And now I'm going to turn this over to Chuck.
Thanks, Mary Kay. So again, we appreciate everybody spending some time with us on this recording. And then we'll look very quickly at the agenda. I'm just giving a quick introduction. Then Pat is going to give an overview of Service Manager 931, which includes a bit of a demo. And you also see some more demo if you stick with us through into the Q&A. And then Ed and Renee are going to go over more details specifically about Service Manager 931's Service Request Catalog. So we'll be looking at some tips and tricks associated with that. Then Casey is going to give an overview of how you can fulfill requests using change management. So we have some new capabilities. Again, Pat will give a little bit of an overview of that. So things such as Process Designer, and provides a little bit more flexibility. So it's an option that we have some customers taking advantage of, and we want everybody on the phone to be aware of. And then we'll have a good 30 minutes worth of Q&A that Mary Kay will facilitate. So with that, then we'll just look at a few more upcoming events. Here's a couple things just want people to be aware of. One is we have some announcements pending, actually coming in the next couple weeks. And if you'd like to make sure that you get the news as soon as it is humanly possible, you could follow that out on the HP ITSM blog. Sorry about that. So you'll see the URL there, just www.hp.com/go/ITSM blog. And we do post other events and information as it becomes available there. And with more people following Twitter these days, you'll also see when we have something go live there. Typically, it'll be tweeted, very quickly. So just another way to kind of get a feed there. So reflecting of coming attractions, we will be at a number of upcoming ITSMF events. So America's Fusion is coming up. We'll be in France, in the UK, and then Japan in the middle of November. But again, we have some new things, and we'll be demonstrating that at any and all those events. And if you're going to be at any of them, we really encourage you to come by the HP booth and see what we're showing there and give us your feedback. And then another thing for anybody that's listening in from Europe, our big flagship event is in Frankfurt, the 4th through the 6th of December, and you'll be able to see and hear more about what's coming and just see kind of Service Manager in action, including 931 that we're going to look at today. So a couple other things. We are planning on another one of these sponsored webinars on the 12th of December. We're actually going to have an ITSM special interest group event webinar that will be occurring on November 8th. And then, we do have people out at various regional Vivid events that are occurring somewhere almost, every other week. So just wanted to give you some of those highlights, and anyhow, stay tuned for more things coming. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Pat.
Thanks, Chuck. Thanks, Mary Kay. So my wonderful section today is to talk about what's new in HP Service Manager 9.31. It is actually releasing this month. In fact, it will be generally available on October 22nd. So let's talk about what's in this particular release. There are really four major areas. The first area is around the self-service portal. It's essentially our launch vehicle for delivering the latest and greatest service catalog, service portal functionality. We'll go over exactly what's in it, but some of the major elements are that we've enhanced self-service support, added knowledge management. We've also added a great deal of customization. You can actually tailor just about everything in the environment. I won't be able to show that. But I can show what's actually new in terms of that service catalog and service portal. With regard to Service Manager collaboration, this was actually released as content earlier on in the year. And what we've done is we've actually embedded it into the actual product itself, and then so that you don't have to add the content once you upgrade. And what we've done is we've extended it to be able to be utilized in context of change records, as well as we've expanded the support of not just Microsoft Communicator, but we've added MS Link as well. With regard to the SMU CMDB integration, that was also released as content earlier in the year, I believe in March. And what we've done is we've embedded this as the de facto integration between Service Manager and UCMDB. Would like to discuss what we did there. And in fact, we added one additional element, which was we've integrated the UCMDB browser actually in to the configuration management screen. So a really great feature that came from UCMDB is actually now embedded within Service Manager. So it's a very seamless experience for the folks that are actually working on the help desk. Last but not least, we'll talk about the clip downtime management, essentially being able to exchange downtime information from Service Manager into our BSM products, application performance management, as well as operations manager, and then vice versa. So to be able to share outage windows between the two, and then to be able to share dynamic outage windows that for last minute or quick changes that need to occur, to be able to make sure that we're not being flooded with events during those times. So let's go ahead and talk about the latest enhancements to the service request catalog. I love slides, but I think it would be much more apropos to actually take a look at it in action. So here we have the service portal that's no longer called service request, the SRC service request catalog, because it really is a service portal. We'll go ahead and log in. And what you'll see is a vastly different, well, a pretty substantially different interface. What you'll have up here is this masthead. This masthead can actually be completely customized and tailored at this point. You'll see a reduced number of tabs. You'll see these little panels. These panels can be turned on and turned off. Background colors can be changed. You can change the fonts, the colors, pretty much everything. So we're really excited about this, because what's important is that when you are using this as a connection point between you and your end users, it's incredibly important for it to look and feel like the rest of your intranet experience. And so that's what we wanted to do, is just to make this an extension of your intranet experience, to make sure that it's comfortable and familiar for those end users of IT services to be able to utilize this self-service capability that we provide here. Another quick thing that you'll notice is that we've essentially have a dynamic shopping cart that we called saved items. Everybody doesn't know what a saved item is, but everybody knows what a shopping cart is. So we conform to the industry standard there. And the other thing that you'll notice is that we have these quick links, and you're able to add as many as you want, as many rows as you want. And really what this allows you to do is give a quick link to pretty much any URL or any active content that you'd like to take a look at. In this case, we have a little video that will play on SRC, so it'll be SRC within SRC. And you'll notice that it actually dimmed and blurred the rest of the screen and focused in on this particular aspect. Now, a lot of people will ask, hey, can we tell people what the current outages are, some hot news? This would be the way that you would do it in this particular version until we can make these panels a lot more customizable. And that's all that essentially remains in terms of customizability for this particular interface. Let's go ahead and go through the panels really quickly. The first one is your approvals. So if we go into this, your approvals, the big thing that you'll notice is that in fact, I can not only look at the service catalog ones, of course I don't have any as this particular user, but also I can do changes as well as requests. So this is a universal approval engine for those managers that tend to be managers that do the approvals, and they tend to be high up, especially for some of the bigger approvals. We've given them an interface, a consolidated interface, to be able to do all of their approvals that would come from service management, and that they can go to one place and get all of those done from this single place, which is really exciting. You can actually see the details of a particular request. There's not a lot of details on this test data, unfortunately, and then you can go ahead and approve or deny not only on this one, and I can actually get back by hitting the back button, but also directly from this particular interface as well. So wanted to reduce the amount of clicks, and you'll see that each and every time. So I can click dashboard, or I can hit back, because everything has a specific URL. And I think I'll hit dashboard since I played around with each one of those elements. So moving on into your request, we used to have a service panel as well as a support panel. What we've done is we've combined those because people really don't care if it was a service request or if it was a support request. So we combined that into a single panel, and they're able to actually go in and take a look at their individual items, like this blue screen. You're able to make some additional comments like, hey, I haven't seen it in a couple of days. I think we're okay. I can actually close this particular support request if I figured out how to solve it or it's not happening anymore. I can update it if I wanted to. So a really great way for the end users to be able to interact with their support folks. And you've noticed that we've really changed how the interaction of this elements work. So we're really excited about the reduced number of clicks and the much more intuitive design that we have with regard to being able to interact with requests that they already have. With regard to the subscriptions, we now have exposed all of the subscriptions that folks have under themselves. So either they've subscribed to personally, or that was to subscribe to them by someone else because they're a part of a department or group. And you're able to see the status. Either it's requested, active, canceled, the one they're in the process of being canceled, so on and so forth. And then with regard to we can see the current status over here with regard to that it's pending, or in fact we can see the ones that are currently ordered. Where we're headed with this, in fact, what we wanted to do with this is to actually connect this up with our understanding of the known status of each one of these services. Now, obviously, there'll be some things like their PC or their handheld mobile device, which we're not going to have any idea what the status of that is unless we're actually actively monitoring it through something like application performance monitoring. But in that case, you'd see a blue unless we've actually connected it up to ATM, for example. Moving on into, you can actually unsubscribe from services and actually see what your SLA is from there as well. There's a couple of panels that we've actually hidden, which are the bundles and hot items. So you can see that level of customization. We wanted to show you that. But now let's go show you the most interesting aspect of it. Now, typically an end user will come in here and they're going to go, you know what, I just want to deal with my phone. So they'll come in here and type phone. That's what I would do. I'm incredibly lazy. I want things to work for me, and that's exactly what we've been able to do. And what you see in this one search result screen is all of the service catalog requests that we have here. I can actually do a new mobile phone if I wanted to. I've got knowledge as well, there we go, as well as support. So from one screen, I can just go ahead and click on all the things that I'd like to select. And so I can change that, and I can go into support and make that the primary one, and I can report a problem on my phone, and it'll actually give me some very unique questions as to what's wrong with my phone and maybe my phone number and what my provider is, in case I don't have that automatically there. And last but not least, we can rotate knowledge in and be able to take a little bit more look at detail as to these particular knowledge articles, and we can then go directly to the knowledge base with regard to being able to search that. So really excited that we've now completed the three kind of legs of the stool for self-service. We've got the service catalog, we've got the support, self-service support, acknowledge, and at any time they can go ahead and just bail and then just do a generic service request over here on the right-hand side. So that was a very quick introduction into what we've been able to do in 931 with regard to the service catalog. So let's go ahead and continue on. I thought hopefully that was a lot more useful than going over this slide, probably a lot more intuitive. And actually you can see the popular bundles right there that we've turned off. Let's go into SM collaboration really quickly. Once again, this was released earlier on in the year. We have this wonderful pane on the right-hand side. You're able to essentially establish a understanding of or a conversation in context of this particular incident, incident 10,024, and then essentially any kind of chat that we have essentially is always going to be saved with regard to this record. If it's closed, we look at it 3 years later, we can unearth and take a look at all of the artifacts that were associated with this particular incident, including all of our instant messaging conversations. The other thing that it allows me to do is I'm able to go ahead and click on this little person icon. It'll take a look at the CI, it'll take a look at the assignment group, it'll take a look at the service, and it'll suggest people that are associated with those three things as potential experts. Now, if I type a message here and I've selected the experts that I want to talk to, they may or may not be in Service Manager. If they're not, it'll go look for them in Microsoft Communicator or Link. If it can't find them there, it'll actually send them an email with a link to that'll go into Service Manager that'll bring them to this this incident with this conversation open. So not only does it locate, but it also finds the experts wherever they may be in or outside of Service Manager. Now, with regard to what we have been able to add, not only we had incident in the content pack that was released, I believe, in January. Now we've added change so that essentially as folks go through the release process, okay, network team's done, system team go, system team done, application team go. Oh, application team had a problem, we'll go ahead and roll back everything, see how that went. You're able to go through postmortems and find out exactly what happened. And typically this information isn't captured, especially in the context of a change. You have to kind of go back and people kind of have to say he said, she said. And it's much better to have an actual record of the physical implementation of that particular change. You can also talk about approvals and what it takes and the different types of, changing the risk aspect based upon what's going on. All that will be saved as an artifact that's associated with the particular change. I think we're there. We're good. Oh, and it also will show the status of those experts if we can find them online or not, if they're in Service Manager. Moving on into the UCMDB integration. This was an integration that was released in March, which at HP Discover in June, I actually had 5 customers track me down and said this is one of the best integrations that they've seen come out of HP and that we should utilize it as a best practice. That's something that's been communicated back to the lab. Not only is it well documented, it installs within minutes and it's configured within minutes. The things that we've been able to do with this particular integration is that we've harmonized the CI relationships. We had like 14 in Service Manager and there were 9 in UCMDB. We've taken the 9 in UCMDB and that's all that you get, so that that's completely harmonized. With regard to the UCMDB, it now populates elements not just from UCMDB to Service Manager, but then also those non-discoverable items and attributes are then populated from Service Manager into UCMDB, which is really, really exciting. So for instance, your entire logical service layer can then be replicated into the UCMDB and then attached to the physical layer if that's what you want to do in terms of editing the logical layer. Most people don't like to jump into the UCMDB's interface unless you're an expert, a configuration manager, if you will. The third thing is with regard to multi-threaded UCMDB and SM synchronization. And so this is, like let's say we patched Windows, right? And so we've got 1 million CIs because the CI is, in use seem to be, is not just the container CI, which would be like a server, but then all the underlying elements as well. All of those are then going to be, at least the core aspects, resynchronized with SM so that it has at least the core information. What it'll do is it'll spawn additional threads to be able to keep up with the load and then kill them off as it doesn't need it. So it's really, really intelligent in terms of being able to burst information to Service Manager. And last but not least, as opposed to keeling over when it comes up to something that Discovery picked up that it's a little odd, it'll actually just set it aside and keep on chugging with regard to processing those records and getting them to Service Manager. And so then you're able to take a look at the error log and then resynchronize those elements that were that were a little bit odd that came back from Discovery. Okay. With regard to clip downtime management, we're able to suppress events during times where we're actually making changes or during release windows, right, where we really don't want to have to know that our entire production environment, if we've taken that down for proactive maintenance as an example, that we would rather not hear that everything's down and get the incredible event flurry that will happen as a result. And so what we want to do is we want to share between our BSM products and our Service Manager what those outage windows look like, those ones that we've formally designed. And either you've planned them in Service Manager, you've planned them in BSM. Regardless, they'll synchronize, and we'll make sure that we suppress events during those periods of time so we have a known outage. With regard to change in Service Manager, there are times where we have to make an emergency change, and we'd like to do something very similar. And so we have the ability to also dynamically control the suppression of messages if we'd like to do that, and that can be set up as well. So those are really the two different use cases, right? Okay, that was good. So with regard to localization, we've localized our service portal in all 14 languages. As you can see, this is a wonderful, I believe that's simple. No, I think that might, no, it's simplified Chinese. So Service Manager and our service portal are now localized in all of the different languages that we have, including one that's right to left. And then we've localized our mobile client in 4 languages, in German, Spanish, French, and Japanese. With regard to the extended support matrix, we now support IE9, Firefox 14, vSphere 5, WAS 8, and SQL Server 2012. So that's the expanded support matrix. So now I'd like to turn it over to my wonderful colleagues in support that would love to talk to you about how do you make SRC sing. Ed?
The first thing I'd like to recommend is everyone, for those using Service Manager 930 or even 711, we release applications patches. If you haven't heard of what this is, it's basically a collection of bug fixes for your application version that you're on. So if you're on, for example, 930, there is a 930's applications patch 2 release that basically it's applied very similar to an upgrade, though it's only a collection of bug fixes. So I highly recommend looking into applying applications patch release. Currently 930 has apps patch 2 released, and it's a collection of all the releases, all the bug fixes since 930 was released in the applications layer. It's very easy to apply the binary fixes and the web client fixes, but it's easy to overlook all the application layer fixes that have been bugs that have been identified and fixed since the 930 release. For example, there were a total of 496 fixes in application or changes to records in the 930 GA release in applications patch 2. So if you haven't looked at applications patch release, I highly recommend to do so. The SRC specifically has quite a few fixes in the applications layer for that interface. So again, highly recommend looking into the applications patch release. The next point I'd like to identify is there may come a need at times to clear SRC's cache. So SRC in the 1.3 release caches the catalog tree locally on the web deployment. So for example, if you've applied an applications patch release, you're restoring your development environment to a copy of production, you've changed a significant amount of data in your catalog tree, you may want to go ahead and clear your SRC cache. And the way you do that is you'd stop your Tomcat web application server, and you delete a series of folders and files in your SRC install. The first would be the version dot file. It's going to be a version dot, the operator name defined in your application properties file, application context properties file. The next is in the Lucene index data. There's going to be a directory for the Service Manager application server name. You want to delete that. You can obviously clearing the logs is going to be optional. And inside your Tomcat directory, there's an SRC4 CSADB directory you can delete as well as the work handling the local host SRC directory. And then you'd restart Tomcat, and SRC would rebuild all those files for you. The next tips and tricks that I'd like to go over is, it is my belief that everyone should understand what the workflow is inside Service Manager, so that you understand where the failure points are. I've helped quite a few customers run through a series of problems as a result of tailoring. Right? No one uses Service Manager out of box. Everyone adds fields, modifies their forms, changes the validations and things like that. And so it's really important to know what SRC is doing in the behind the scenes to identify what areas need to be modified. The first record I'd like to point out is this SC API _ SVC cat request script library record. In this script library record, you're going to find a series of function calls that have to do with creating, updating, closing interaction records from the SRC, and it's only used during the SRC interface. The main requests that we're going to go over are the create request, which handles a create self-service interaction and a create interaction. Both have to do with either a self-service request or requests from the catalog itself. So inside those create interaction functions, there are additional validations outside of the normal validations you have during format control. Validations include a description. Severity is validated against the $G.urgency global list. There's validations for the contacts fields, title, callback type, and it ensures that the affected item in the request is validated against the user subscriptions. So if you don't use fields like severity or have a different or no longer use the global list $G.urgency, you may want to go into these functions and tailor the validations to meet your needs.
Next slide.
Yep, please. In addition, the create request also sets certain default values. So if you have certain expectations for certain fields, like the categorization, the assignment groups, you're wondering why the assignment group for the interaction is being defaulted to auto. It's because in these JavaScript routines, they're being set. It's kind of an important piece of information to know if you want to control what the assignment group is going to be set to, or change how the categorization is. The routines do set the categorization based on the service catalog entry, and so if you need to modify that, you can either modify the service catalog entry or modify the JavaScript routine. Also, in addition, many customers change the categorization tree, or they don't use product type, they use problem type, or they have a different set of fields for their categorization. You'd want to adjust this routine accordingly. During this workflow for the create interaction requests, there's also an additional RAD routine it's also been fixed in the latest applications patch release for 9.30. So I can't stress that enough, that you should look into applying the applications patch releases. Specifically, the routine had a fix for customers that use the return to blank call feature, and so yeah, highly recommend it. SRC interaction fulfillment. So the next part of the workflow after the interaction is created is, once it's approved, there's a trigger that runs against the interaction that generates a linker class support catalog fulfillment schedule record. This schedule record, so obviously it only gets created once the interaction is approved. So if there's a failure in the approval process or a problem during your approvals, you may want to refer to the approval definitions, things of that nature. So the support catalog fulfillment schedule record is what creates the fulfillment record. That's defined in your service catalog entry. It can either create a change, create a request, create an incident, things of that nature. Yeah, so and that's configured through the SVC cat interface record and your service catalog record. It defines the fields that need to be populated in your target record. It contains expressions that are evaluated, and again, if you use change management and you've configured a catalog entry to create a change record, these expressions all work for the out-of-box. But if you changed validations, if you've changed, which is very common, right? You're going to change. You're going to expect a different set of fields to be populated. You may want to consider adding expressions here so that when the fulfillment record gets created, that those validations get passed. And it's very common for a validation failure here to prevent your target fulfillment record to get created. Sometimes it's gonna result, whether it's pulling data from your interaction using the link record. There's basically quite a few ways to result in a failed validation here. And so you'd want to make sure you review your link record, the expressions here, and any other data that gets defined here. Additionally, if you tailored anything in the process record, that could also cause some sort of failure in the workflow. So these are the kind of areas that you need to review for ensuring that your interactions or that your fulfillment records get created. And Renee will cover other deployment type tips and tricks for the SRC.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Ed. Essentially, here on this particular slide, I want to give you a super distilled version of SRC and how you can deploy it, or things you should keep in mind when you're thinking about deploying SRC with a hardware load balancing device. So again, keep in mind here that we can pretty much have an entire presentation on this specific topic. So the information that you're about to see within the next couple of slides is very compact. Very likely there might be some questions about this towards the end of the call. Rest assured that the HP R&D teams here are working on documenting the information that I'm about to present here. Again, if it seems like I'm glossing over a lot of details, keep in mind that those details will be forthcoming as the teams here get all of our quote-unquote eggs in a row so we can make this information available to the field and our customer base. Many of you may be familiar that this service request catalog product is essentially a web services-based integration to Service Manager. So with that in mind, you may also be familiar with the best practice around web services integrations with Service Manager, in that the R&D organizations and the support organizations typically recommend that when you are using web services-based integrations with Service Manager, that those Service Manager servlets that will be servicing those requests be run in what's called debug node mode. If you're not familiar with the debug node mode in Service Manager, that basically is a parameter that defines whether a particular servlet that has this parameter passed into it is part of the Service Manager software load balancer rotation. So again, if you're familiar sort of with that technical aspect of the product, you would know that Service Manager does provide a software-based load balancer in order to properly distribute client requests across your Service Manager deployment. When you're working specifically with SRC, however, again, because it is a web services-based integration, any servlets that you spin up in order to service requests coming from SRC should be run in debug node mode. So the question then becomes, if you are running more than 2 Service Manager servlets in debug node mode, and you have a number of SRC web tiers that are trying to connect to Service Manager, how do you manage those components in your deployment so that load distribution is successfully accomplished? The answer is essentially to use a hardware load balancer device. And so let's talk about some do's and don'ts here. Next slide, please.
Hey, and Renee, whatever you're doing right now is good on the mic. You faded out just a tiny bit there, but you sound good now.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, so as you're planning out your or you're thinking about deploying service request catalog in a sort of distributed environment within Service Manager, do understand your hardware load balancer device's feature set. And what I mean by that is make sure that you ask your network engineers or your hardware vendor questions such as, can this device perform SSL offloading? Asking this particular question is very important if you are planning on using any type of SSL encryption within your specific implementation of this product. The reason why this is important sort of falls into the next do on the list here, which is to make sure that you plan your security requirements with regards to Service Manager with the appropriate staff that you have in-house. And the types of questions that you should be having in mind as you proceed is to think about the various implementation options that Service Manager provides when you're working with SRC. What I mean by that specifically is there are essentially 3 distinct communication types that you can use with Service Manager and SRC. The first one being zero or no SSL encryption between the between the SRC web tier layer and the Service Manager server backend, which is defined as those servlets that are running in debug node. So that particular scenario would you would more than usually run into when you're in a development mode, or if you're testing in a sandbox, or you're just getting to know the product. Usually in those types of simple scenarios, you don't have a specific need to enable SSL. So if that's the case, and you're thinking about using a hardware load balancer to run some early tests, then the actual deployment for proper load distribution using that hardware load balancer is really quite simple, and I'll get into what that entails as we move forward. The second communication scenario that I want to break down is once you get past that initial sandbox testing and you're doing some QA testing or potential development testing, you want to think about possibly enabling some of the one-way SSL, or what they call anonymous SSL features that once again encrypt communication between the SRC web tier component and the Service Manager servlets that are running in debug node mode. When you're using that particular mode of operation, which we'll call simple SSL here, you'll want to make sure that your hardware load balancer device is able to perform some type of SSL offloading. SSL offloading is essentially defined as the ability for the device to be able to take incoming requests that are coming from clients and be able to decrypt them so that it's able to see some of the HTTP header information on that particular request so that it's able to determine how to properly distribute the load across the service manager servers that are running in the background. And I'll sort of talk about what you're going to be keying on when you're configuring the hardware load balancer to make sure that that proper load distribution occurs. Finally, the third mode of communication that you should keep in mind here when you're deploying SRC with Service Manager is sort of the most complex implementation option that you have, and this is the use of two-way or mutual SSL authentication. In that particular communication mode between SRC web tier and the Service Manager server, you essentially have simple SSL scenario plus the added security feature of making sure that any incoming clients, which in this case is the SRC web tier component, provide a SSL certificate to the SM server so that there is a mutual authentication between both communication endpoints. So this is essentially what some people like to call like a paranoid mode of operation for encrypting communication between these two endpoints. Some government institutions really like that particular aspect, and some financial institutions as well too. So keep that in mind. Last but not least, on the subject of security requirements, make sure that when you're talking about your security requirements with Service Manager and SRC, if you have a PKI team in-house, make sure you engage them early on. A PKI team is what we would define as a public key infrastructure team. So these are the people in your organization that are familiar with how to generate SSL certificates. They're familiar with certificate authorities, and they're basically your go-to guys that understand how to encrypt communications within your organization. So if you have such a team, a security team, a PKI team, make sure you get them involved early on in your discussions when you're thinking about deploying the SRC product with Service Manager in this type of deployment scenario, which involves the use of a hardware load balancer device.
Hey, Renee?
Yes.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure we got to kind of wrap up this section so we can get to Casey because we're running late. And we will stay on the line to hit some of the high Q&As here, but just sorry.
Sure. Yeah, I'll speed it up a little bit. Okay, so an important Service Manager parameter that you have to keep in mind when you're dealing with this particular type of implementation is the web services _ session timeout value. By default, this value is set to about 30 minutes, which is typically sufficient for the SRC integration. However, you want to keep in mind that if you are setting the web services _ session timeout parameter value in your sm.ini file, which is the Service Manager server configuration file, that is a global value. So that 30-minute value will be set for any and all web services-based integrations that you're using with Service Manager. So it will not only affect SRC, but it'll affect products like UCMDB if you're using UCMDB, or any custom web services applications that you're using with Service Manager. So we would recommend in the SRC-specific implementation that you set web services _ session timeout in the sm.cfg file, the Service Manager configuration file, because you can basically set that on a per servlet basis. Earlier in the previous slide, I was talking about making sure that you understand your hardware load balancer feature set. You'll want to make sure that your device is able to perform cookie-based persistence in order to properly distribute the load in this type of deployment. The key for proper cookie-based persistence is to use the JSession ID cookie, which is provided by the Service Manager servlet that's running in debug node mode. So, if you're talking to your network engineers, just let them know that the HP recommended method for performing session persistence is to use the JSession ID cookie. So that's if I could emphasize any one piece of information in this particular slide, is to keep in mind the JSession ID. Finally, we are working internally on a guide for setting up SRC with some popular industry standard hardware load balancers, so stay tuned for additional information as we go forward. Next slide, please. A couple of don'ts here. If you're familiar with hardware load balancing terminology, a very popular type of persistence is called IP source based. We recommend that you do not use this type of persistence with the SRC product, primarily because there's a lot more overhead involved in setting this up. Again, the emphasis is to use cookie-based persistence, which is keyed off of the JSession ID cookie. Moving on here, most hardware load balancer devices do offer some type of health monitor to check to see if the SM servlets that are running in debug mode are actually up and able to take requests. Most of these health monitors default to using a TCP-based health check. While those can be sufficient on a very basic level, the emphasis here that I'm trying to make is don't just use the TCP-based health monitors. Try to use something a little bit more sophisticated like an HTTP health monitor if your hardware load balancer device offers such an option. And even better yet, try to use a scripted health monitor check, which you can basically perform a specific HTTP GET request. You can parse a server's HTTP response and make sure that everything is up and running properly. Last but not least, don't hesitate to engage HP in your pre-planning and implementation stages when you're working or you're thinking about using the SRC product with an industry standard hardware load balancing device. We're here to answer your questions.
All right. So Casey, you're up, and just quick thing again, we will stay later for Q&A. Sorry for that. For running a little bit long. We knew we had a lot of content here. The other thing is, we just know with Service Manager 931 that a lot of people have been waiting for this, particularly because of the customization capabilities being added to SRC. So we got arguably our top 2 technical people that work with customers on implementations of that to go through the previous section on tips and tricks, just and let you know what kind of resources are out there also. All right, Casey, you're up.
Can you hear me, Chuck?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so regardless, because half of you are using ESS, the other half are using SRC mainly. Well, actually, 20% on SRC. So I want to talk about, before I actually jump into how you can leverage the new process designer for change management. So this is a new feature, content pack, that was just introduced late last year. Now there are some requirements. You have to be at least on Service Manager 930 application with at least a patch 2 for binaries. But what you can see here, we actually converted change management to be more user-friendly. So I'll just start off before jumping into how you can leverage change management to do a lot of your fulfillment process. So again, regardless if you're doing ESS or SRC, you can use the back-end change management to do a lot of fulfillment process for you. So when this was introduced, as I started looking at it, starting listening to customer requirements, I thought, hey, this would be great to fulfill some of the request requirements. And as I get through the slides, I'll point out why. But before I do that, for those who might not have seen or have heard of process design for change management yet, let me just go through a really quick 4 to 5 minutes intro on what that is. So again, this was introduced as a content pack late last year for Service Manager 930. And it's just a visual workflow. So you can see here with it just looks a lot nicer as far as maintaining your change workflow. So this is an example of an emergency change workflow that we provide out of box. Obviously, probably 99.9% of our customers will modify this workflow to meet their needs. Next, Chuck. So I just want to highlight again different transitions. So you can see all the phases: registration, impact, analysis, all of that. There's a couple of transitions. One I want to highlight is the automatic transition. So meaning that instead of asking the user to click on a button to move to the next phase, you can automatically set up a condition that will kick it off to the different phase that you need. Extremely flexible. Click and drag. Put in your rule sets. So rule sets are something that we've used to now replace some of the stuff that you used to do in format control. So things like validations, calling a JavaScript, calling notifications, all of that. We're now trying to make it so that you as a change admin person just come into a change workflow and pretty much put in all your process definition within the change workflow. So again, this is an example of just an automatic transition. Once it's been approved, or in this case, once it's been denied when you're in the ECAP approval phase, to automatically go back to the phase that you want. So it's just a simple screenshot, and it's just a lot user-friendly. Just click and drag. You don't need to know the old Service Center, Service Manager syntax anymore. So now you just click on, with an example you see here, the current record, basically your current change record. If a certain field satisfies certain criteria, automatically move to a different place. So extremely flexible. So if you have not seen this yet, I would recommend maybe, again, the requirement is you do need to be on Service Manager 930 application with a binary of at least patch 2. But I would recommend at least patch 3 if you haven't installed it yet, and play around in your test environment. Next. And this is an example of the rule sets. So if you're familiar with Service Manager for Service Center format control, you can see the rule sets. In this case, the one I've highlighted is on an update. Right, so it's almost similar to all of the different sections in format control. You're on enter, on exit, initialization, on display, etc. So that matches with the format control that you're used to. But again, we made it so that you're now able to maintain any processes, any rules that you have in this particular workflow, so that you don't have to go to different areas. It's all in here. Next. And this is an example, one workflow that rule type that we have is setting mandatory fields. So before you have to go to format control or data policy, put in validation rule, not in all this, not in all that, right? So now with the new process designer, you can just go ahead and just add it on, and again, user-friendly, click and drag, click on this field. Here are the fields I want mandatory. So it's very simple to set up. Doesn't require your knowledge, basically prior knowledge of Service Center, Service Manager syntax. Next. And we now have in change, what drives the workflow, we introduce a concept of change model. So a change model is where you define what workflow you want to use. Templates, right? So you can actually open up a certain change type, and we can automatically fill in the templates for you, all the default fields. And the biggest thing here that I personally like when I start looking at this is like, wow, we can use this to fulfill a lot of our request requirements. An example that I'm going to show you is new employee, but this concept of task editor. Next. So at the task editor within the change model, you can see here it's again a very simple click and drag where you can define your task, the sequencing. You can say, hey, this task depends on this task, and these different tasks depend on this different task. And the cool thing about this is with the new task editor within the new change management using Process Designer, is you can tell it where do you want this task to be created. So in the screenshot here, you can see the start phase and the end phase. So you could technically plan for the work. So if you're part of a hardware team, for example, and there are change requests coming in for you to maybe install a hardware or order it, whatever it happens to be, it might be dependent upon other things, right? The procurement team getting the actual hardware. But you can look at your work queue and plan for future stuff, because those tasks are created, in this case, like to the perform plan schedule. It's going to be created in the plan and schedule phase. But you really can't work on it yet until it gets to a certain phase. So it's pretty flexible where tasks are now not tied to a certain phase. Before you have to complete all these tasks before you can move to the next phase. But now we made it so that it's more flexible. It's extremely easy to define dependency. So again, when I saw this, I go, wow, a request that I get a lot from customers is how do we handle something like a new employee coming into our organization? There are a lot of tasks, there are a lot of dependency that happens to that. So again, regardless of what you're using, ESS or SRC, this is just the back end part. So if you can use the change model with the new process designer to do some of the requirements, it works so well. So go ahead. Next, Chuck.
You bet.
So let me kind of step through a simple service request catalog for a new employee. Just everybody goes through this. For a new employee, there's lots of team involved, your HR team, your hardware team, your application team, your network team, email, et cetera, et cetera. Right? Lots of teams that needs to be involved in here. And again, there might be dependency. So with the service request catalog, a user logs in, again, regardless of ESS or SRC, they say, hey, I have a new employee starting. Next. So once they select that, it goes through the approval. So these two blocks here are basically your request catalog portion. Once it's been approved, next, that can kick out in our case, I'm going to use a change process. So this is where you can do your technical approvals. So the top two are SRC or ESS, next, and then the bottom are basically our change flow. So within here, we can implement the task automatically created. It goes to a different team, or it can automatically be provisioned. So like, creating an Active Directory, that's something that you can create a task for, but it can automatically be created. So next. So simple request, right? But it's the fulfillment side. It's how do you set up so that it's so easy for your different teams to work on what tasks are assigned to them. Next. So what I did here was I created, using the new change process flow, a fulfillment workflow, a simple thing such as a technical approval once it's been approved. And again, you don't need that approval phase if you don't use it. You can just define, make it as simple as you want, just have a fulfillment phase, right? So this is to highlight the flexibility of the workflow. So I easily created a technical approval phase. Once it's been approved, it goes to fulfillment, you close it out. So the magic here is in the fulfillment side. Next. And this is the strongest part, I think, with the new process designer. So for a new employee, with a simple click and drag, when I define a change model for a new employee, I can say, here are all the tasks that needs to be done for a new employee. Right? So you can see here with all the dependencies. So this is something that can easily be created. I mean, I created this in less than a minute. Obviously, it's a process that's underneath it, right? All the field validations, who needs to be notified, all of that, you need to define that yourself. But as far as setting dependency, creating new tasks, it's a simple click and drag. So this paints it beautifully for something like a new employee, where once I put in a new employee request, once it's been approved, it kicks out a change record to do fulfillment. The first task you'll see is an HR task that needs to be fulfilled. But all the other tasks can be created, but they're inactive, so that you can use it for planning. So lots of dependencies there, and it just works and flows really well. So just something to think about if you want to start looking at deploying the process design for change management. So I know I went through it fast, but I barely made it, so not 1 minute over time here. So I think that's all I have.
You're great, Casey. Really appreciate that. So again, a lot of things, Service Manager 931, what Casey was just talking about, as said, if you have the new change management module on 930, you can take advantage of that. And again, the feedback has been really positive on those capabilities. You will be seeing a lot more process designer and task editing, via graphical codeless tools, in the not too distant future. So just another plug to kind of stay tuned to that ITSM blog, or stay on one of those Twitter feeds and be able to kind of get the latest breaking news. So we ran along, but again, we wanted to be through a little bit earlier, but we definitely will stick around. And Mary Kay, can you service up some questions?
So I'm going to take us back to kind of the beginning of the presentation. First question is, will the SM collaboration or MS Link allow end users, customers to contact the service desk to chat, and are details of that chat captured in an interaction?
So with regard to the whole notion of being able to go out to the end user and not just talk between folks within the IT organization, that's something that we're definitely looking at to extend this current chat feature. Currently, it works for incidents. We then extended it in 931 to change as well, so that you can do postmortems on what went well, what didn't go well with that whole release activity. And then we're definitely looking to push forward to how do we then extend this out to the end user, so that this chat, which is then saved with the record, essentially. It's always linked to the record in perpetuity, would then also be there for interaction, so that when the help desk operators are chatting back and forth with the folks, the end users, that's then saved, and then people who are level 2, level 3 can then look back at that record to see exactly what the end user was saying and not get the game of telephone where lots of information is then left out and summarized.
Great.
So in the future.
Great. Next question is the self-service portal. Is it for all modules, incident, changes, requests, etc.?
The self-service portal is really intended to be how end users interact with Service Manager. So it's optimized for, I have a problem and I need to get it solved quickly. And so you have really quick access into knowledge, into this support, right? Being able to then quickly guide them through a set of questions so that there's not this back and forth, and then be able to order things from the catalog. So it's really those perspectives. For access to the modules, you would either do the mobile client or actually the web client itself to be able to give folks within IT access to interactions, incidents, problems, changes. Really, you're dealing with interactions primarily with that end user interface.
Okay. Are there plans to eventually connect Service Manager with other chat applications besides MS Link, such as AIM, MSM?
So what was really cool, I was hoping to, and I apologize for my inability to get into the system until just now, the chat functionality actually is embedded in SM. It allows you to suggest folks that you want to interact with based upon the ticket, like assignment groups, service owners, the person who initiated the ticket, so on and so forth. You can add them independently. It's not only within Service Manager, but then it links out to Office Communicator and Link, and we're looking to expand that coverage. If it can't find them there, it'll actually send them an email with the message and a link in context so that they can click on it. It brings Service Manager up with that ticket and the conversation up and running for them. So it'll find them no matter what. Not only does it suggest, it finds them.
Great. Can you talk more about, or you probably don't have time to demo, the UCMDB browser?
Oh, so the UCMDB browser is a really great thing that came out with UCMDB 9.0 something. I can't remember if it was 3 or 5. And it's an incredible tool that extends the usability of UCMDB well past just the configuration crowd. It really is a wonderful tool that we are looking to actually embed within Service Manager, so that when you go to the configuration management tab, that you'll actually see the UCMDB browser. You can cross-launch it today. I know Casey could probably do it in 5 seconds flat, but we really want to make it a part of one of the collapsible panels. But it's a really great tool that allows you to quickly get the high-level details of a configuration item, and it really does extend the use beyond just the configuration management folks to just about everybody in IT.
Next question is, which HP team is responsible to guide the customizations per client? And I think that was on a slide that was about the ESS portal. There was an early slide about customizations.
On SRC?
Yeah, actually, it was probably an SRC slide.
So what team is responsible for customizations?
To guide the customizations per client, per customer.
I could see a couple answers to this. One is if anybody's working with any kind of implementation partner that provides help there, they would help with that. If they wanted advice on how to do that, via some other mechanism, there's actually another plug for another thing that is out there is the HP Connections group. So I have the ITSM blog here. If you actually just go up, like I think 1 or 2 levels, there's a complete support forum there that people will pose questions on and things like that. But I think it's more of kind of the implementation side. If you're working with the HP account team, I'm sure you get a little bit of pre-sales advice from people like Casey and others. But I mean, there's a variety of kind of mechanisms on the advice part of that.
Okay. What about knowledge integration? There's actually a few questions in that vein.
Actually, yeah, the great thing is that we now actually have knowledge integrated with SRC, and so that when you go and actually search on, let's say phone is a great example. And in fact, I could bring that up here in just a little bit, and certainly will as we go through the questions. Since we just see a Q&A slide, I'll actually show it how that works as we go. But I can't multitask. I'm terrible at it. Essentially, what you do is you type phone in, and you'll see all the services associated with it. You'll see all of the support items associated with it, like mobile phone support as an example, and then all of the knowledge articles that are associated with it, tips and tricks for troubleshooting mobile phones. Issues with dropping phones in toilets, right? So all sorts of knowledge articles will be associated with it. And what you can do is you can actually rotate what is the primary focus. It's all on one screen so that we eliminated the number of clicks, and then you're able to then say, okay, I want to focus primarily on support. And so the support goes from the bottom right-hand side up to the front, and I want to look at knowledge, and that goes from the right-hand side up to the front. But it's really intended from one screen you can get anything, services, support, or knowledge. And I'll work on bringing that up right now.
And another thing there is if you were doing any kind of process work, the latest 930 and 931 also support the process designer capabilities within the knowledge management module. What do you have next, Mary Kay?
Next up is how do I best describe the difference between self-service interface and service catalog interface, because ESS also used to provide subscription feature for service catalog.
I'm having a tough time hearing the questions.
So it was subscriptions inside of ESS versus SRC differences. How would you compare the two?
I would compare the two as, I think we had an ESS, we just had a list, in case you can correct me, with regard to, okay, great, I'm up and running. I'll actually show it in just a second here. I think the big differences with regard to this one is that I think we've actually gotten to parity. You could unsubscribe from services in ESS. You could see the list of services. In SRC, you can actually not only see the list of services, but what state they're in, right? Active and what form of pending they are, whether or not they were ordered for you from a department perspective, somebody ordered on behalf of you, or if you ordered it yourself. I think as we roll forward with this, we definitely want to make this a center point for the ability to actually get knowledge or submit tickets and provide status, but that's something that we're definitely looking at in the future. What we have today is actually a little bit better than parity than ESS today. Can you pass me the presenter ball, and I'll actually bring it up.
Susan?
Absolutely. Here you go, Pat.
And we can keep going with the questions.
Great. Are the SM to CMS calls still handled by web services?
SM to CMS calls still handled by web services. I don't have an answer for that one.
I guess I don't understand the question.
I think that was with regards to the synchronization you're showing between UCMDB.
Ed, Renee, Casey,
it's the integration point. The question is what technology is being used to integrate Surge Manager and CMS. So it's the answer is it is web services, and from CMS and CMS to Surge Manager and Surge Manager CMS, and the setup is actually all done on the CMS side. So even if you want to just push data from Surge Manager to CMS, that still needs to be set on the CMS side, but it is via web services. You can always use connected as another method, but what we have shipped out of box is web services.
Okay, and I think along a related vein, I think the question came in when we were covering those slides, does the error handling produce reports? the synchronization error.
Oh, okay. So the error handling that happens between UCMDB and Service Manager. So what happens is, prior, what would happen is that you would there would be like a bad discovery pattern, or there'd be some weird data that would come over, and essentially the connection would just drop. And so occasionally you would see that the base information wasn't replicating correctly, and you'd have to go and debug it. Now what happens is that when it comes to a record that it doesn't quite understand, what it does is it puts it to the side and keeps chugging. So it doesn't stop processing. It will always get all of the records that it possibly can, and it actually has a log of all the records that didn't pass, and it gives you a warning message that that happened. So so it's really resilient compared to what it was. The other thing that it is it's multi-threaded. So what it'll do is, let's say we do a patch to all of our Windows servers, and that results in 1 million CI changes, right? What will happen is that it will then spawn additional threads to be able to keep up with the load, so that it's able to really burst that information to Service Manager, and then it'll reduce the number of threads as the traffic goes down.
What web hosting platform can SRC run on?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. What web hosting platform can SRC run on?
Okay, so the SRC product is distributed as a J2SE-based WAR file. So I believe our compatibility matrix states that we run on products such as Tomcat, and Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, I think our compatibility matrix also states that we have support for WebSphere as well.
Yes, WebSphere and Tomcat.
Hey, there was a few questions about the SRC cache. Define periodic for the need to clear the cache, weekly, bi-weekly, and I think there must have been some instructions. Someone asked if they could get a copy of these slides and repost it, which is yes.
So Pat, did you want to talk through this just a tiny bit, or?
Oh, that's a question towards me. So
yeah,
the cache can be cleared. Yeah, the cache can be cleared as needed. The SRC does periodically update its indexes from Service Manager, and so it really should be done on an as-needed basis.
And how would I know when I need to do it?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I would say, how would I know? You say as needed. How would I know when I need to clear the cache?
If you experience an issue where a catalog entry isn't showing up in your catalog tree within SRC, outside of that, there's really no way to determine when needed. Or it should be cleared whenever you plan a significant number of changes to the catalog structure and entry within SM. That would probably be a pretty good time to plan a clearing of SRC cache.
Okay. So next question that is about, it's a very detailed question about language support. I'd like if HP could take a look at all the questions, because we're probably not going to get through all today, and provide answers to anything we cannot get to today. Let's see. If you only have one web server, how many users can it handle?
Renee, do you want to take that one?
Sure. In general, I believe that if we're talking specifically about SRC running on Tomcat, let's say, for example, the general rule of thumb for the number of concurrent users that can be adequately serviced by one Tomcat instance is somewhere in the realm between 100 and 200 users. So I would average that out probably to about 150 users per instance, per Tomcat instance specifically. Yes, that's concurrent, exactly. So if you have a need to scale that up, that is definitely not an issue. On the back end side, on the back end side of Service Manager over at the SM server side, we could then spin up additional SM debug node servlets as required as you scale up. So, as long as you have sufficient hardware resources available, it should not be an issue to scale that up.
Okay. Will the hardware load balancer guide also address high availability?
That's a good question. Right now, the primary focus is on just getting to our customer base the technical information needed to configure and set up SRC for use with a hardware load balancer device. In essence, when we're talking about high availability with a hardware load balancer device, you should be able to have a redundant device available on the network to take over in case your primary hardware load balancer device goes offline. So that would typically be something that would be out of scope, something that you would consider in a so-called active-passive failover configuration. So that would be the recommended sort of mode of operation if you require redundancy / failover in your production environments.
Next question, in all versions of HP Service Manager, I didn't see any monitoring options to check health status for HP monitoring software or any other vendor. Did HP think of this area to cover?
Yeah, we get this question quite a bit. I mean, since we've got a complete stack of monitoring, of automation, of ITSM, of governance portfolio, why on earth don't we provide an out-of-the-box set of templates for operations manager, as an example, or our application performance management tool? The answer is that is definitely very high on the list, and it's something that we are looking to take care of in the very near future. We're just trying to work out how that would be deployed, if it's deployed in that tool or if it's something that is deployed as content and you can just download it. We're trying to figure out what's the best way to deal with it. But yes, we definitely want to utilize it. It's actually, well, there's a lot of people that have actually done it already, so we don't really need to reinvent the wheel. So we're looking at which one's the best, and we're looking at how to get that deployed.
Is the upgrade process from Service Manager 9.2 to 9.3 fairly straightforward? And how can I find information on getting this effort started in my environment?
So, Ed, this is probably you and me. From 9.20, 9.21 to 9.30, it's a very easy upgrade. We've actually not only tested this, we've had that's what we do is we actually test on customer data sets, and we actually do the upgrades from all the different points. And 921 and 920 is actually pretty easy to get to 930, 931. So the effort's pretty easy. There's a utility that actually guides you through that process, the upgrade utility, and we've actually automated quite a few steps in that as of the last release. I don't think we've made any improvements to it other than fix some things with regard to some consistency issues. Ed, how would you respond to that in terms of, I mean, we actually haven't seen it yet, so it wouldn't have passed your desk yet. But
yeah, I mean, I agree. The applications upgrades have been improved significantly, especially with the 930 application upgrade. And yeah, I'd have to just simply agree with what you said.
Will Process Designer be used for request and other modules like incident and problem?
Absolutely.
Chuck, what was the question, Chuck?
Process Designer use expanding to other modules.
Oh, absolutely. There's an entire roadmap that's associated with it. We're looking at extending it in the very near future to the help desk modules, interaction, incident, problem. We're then going to request, and then we're going to create a brand new module called release that you can track several requests for changes and then have them be a part of a release window. So yes, definitely we're looking at making that happen in the very near future. In fact, that's always been the plan. We wanted to go a little faster, but then release changed and we found some things that we could do better, and so we released another version of change, and that set us back a little bit.
And a related question, should we move from release management to change management, or will RM evolve to process designer?
And we get that question a lot, and I think I'll have Casey jump in here as well. What's the big difference between utilizing request and change? We're obviously looking at, when we do the process designerization, if you will, of request management, is to really do an overhaul on it. Some of the great things that you have within request management is the ability to work with time, like wait for 3 hours or 3 days or some kind of segment that's a little bit more interesting to try to deploy and change. Obviously, the benefits of doing it in change is that you've got the process designer, and you saw the wonderful work that Casey did, that the whole task planner just makes visualizing it and seeing what steps need to happen and when and what's dependent on which a lot easier to do. So yeah, it's actually quite it's quite an advantage, and that's why we had Casey come on and show it. I think the other disadvantage would be the fact that if you do a lot of change management, it does kind of pollute the change record. I don't know, Casey, what would you say to that?
Yeah, so mainly for me was when I saw, like you mentioned, Pat, was the task dependency stuff, right? So that's, while you can still, there's some sort of dependency on request management side, but until we actually have the process designer in place, what I saw with the task dependency that was introduced in process designer, that was the main thing for me. It's just as far as making it extremely easy for an admin person, for the fulfillment person, I should say, to define all those task dependency. That was the main drive there. So I can't speak on the future of process designer for request management, but that was the main thing that sold me, was the task dependency stuff.
The new SRC 9.31 mentioned generic approvals. Can you expand on what the new approval functionalities will be?
I would be delighted to do that. In fact, I was actually just showing that. So what we mean by generic approval, I think a better way of talking about that is more that you can what you can approve is actually far more. So before in SRC, you really only had the ability to approve the service request, essentially the service catalog request. We now have the ability to also approve changes and requests. And so that's what you're seeing here. We're actually seeing a bunch of requests that we now have the ability to approve. We can actually go ahead and see the detail of that by clicking on it. We can just do a quick approve and deny if we wanted to. So yeah, it's a really great interface to do all of your approvals. So you can essentially just give managers and the people that approve, who really don't want to jump into Service Manager, a single place where they can do all of their approvals from this particular location.
Okay. Would customers be able to submit feedback to knowledge management articles via SRC?
Whew, that's a really good question. Out of the box, Casey, I'm not sure that we have the, we had that ability that, I think there's a natural way that it does that by people going to it, but the ability to give feedback on a particular knowledge article, that existed in ES, didn't it? ESS, and I thought we had something similar, but I'm not positive.
Yeah, I do see in SRC, but in ESS, yeah, there was an option to do feedback for knowledge. I believe in SRC, it's mainly for searches and informational stuff. I'm not sure if the feedback feature is there yet.
Oh, we can go look.
You can, yeah, I was going to say you can go ahead and bring up a knowledge article and see if the feedback section is there.
And as you're using that search bar, someone would like you to elaborate on the search functionality within SRC. Will requesters be able to search on keywords for their service and support tickets?
Yes, and so the general bar that I just brought up there for search, I just typed in phone because, let's face it, end users, they're tired, they want to get something done, they don't want to go, hunting and pecking like that. I just clicked in phone, and with the phone, we get all of the service requests, we get all of the knowledge requests, we get all of the support requests. In this case, I'll bring up knowledge. Now, if I go into a specific domain, like within services or support, I can then just say, you know what, I don't want all of the other stuff. I just want to get the service catalog. I just want to get support areas. But the generic search, which is up here at the top, essentially just type something in and it'll give you the results for all of them. And as you can see, it's just a single, I can do a click and I can get to wherever I want. And actually, I was wanting to go in to answer the previous question on this. But yeah, that's how the generic search works. And in fact, you can see the doc types, and depending on what you highlight, you get different options here on the left on how to navigate it, especially when, obviously with this demo system, we have, 3 knowledge articles when you'll probably get hundreds when you're, in a live production environment. So it allows you to go and look by category and doc type. So yeah, it's a pretty efficient interface.
Which features of the new Service Catalog interface are customizable? For example, if I had BombGuard, could I integrate it?
Oh man, I want to go everywhere, and my poor MiFi is suffering under the load. Anyway, so with regard to what's customizable, all of the fonts, the backgrounds, the colors, you can get rid of that HP Service Portal and put your company's logo in whatever kind of masthead that you'd like to have in there. You can choose to show and hide. Let me go back to the dashboard really quickly if it'll let me. I think I've gotten behind. With regard to the main portlets that you see here, your approvals, your requests, you'll notice that we don't see the bundles and the hot items. That's because we went ahead and hid them for this because it's easier just to show the 4. In terms of how the BombGuard integration is, in the configuration guide, in Appendix A actually tells you exactly how to set up the BombGuard integration. Essentially what you'll do is you'll set it up as a hot link. These are the hot links. You can add as many as you want. You can have 50. I wouldn't suggest it. I'd probably have 4 or 8. And then essentially you just say chat with the help desk specialist, and you'd have a nice little picture of somebody smiling with a headset or something. And then you go ahead and click it, and that would then essentially bring up the BombGuard chat window. They're able to chat with the person. The remote person can take control of the person's environment. So that's how the BombGuard integration would work.
Great.
Great. We get a demo in even though we couldn't.
If updates are made to an incident ticket and not the interaction, can the user check the updates using SRC?
Absolutely. So we would go in here and we'd look at the service requests. No, the support requests. So there's only one portlet. There used to be 2. And we made that a little bit more efficient. And you'll see that you have we have 9 open and several closed. I can just go into the open and I'll see all of the open requests here, and I can go ahead and click on them. And every time you click on the share this externally option within an interaction, and depending on how you set up your system, if incidents then are synchronizing the interactions, if you hit that same button and if you've enabled it, you're able to then see that. So when they say I got a blue screen and you do any kind of updates, they'll actually see all of those updates down here, down below on the bottom of the screen here with the updates. So it's this activity log. So you get to choose what they see, so they don't get to see all of the chaos that's going on to try to figure out what this issue is and all of the finger pointing. What they do end up seeing is, in fact, what a horrible description that is, but they'll see what status it is and where they are along the process with what we want
the end customer to see, not the fact that it was the system group pointed at the network group and said, not mine, it's yours, and then it went back 50 times. You only see the things that, yeah, I've got it, it looks like it's this kind of problem, we're researching it, we estimated a time of 3 hours, those kinds of things that they'll see.
Hey, Pat, just to expand on that, so the question was updates from incidents. So the answer is still yes. So this interaction that you're seeing, why they don't have direct access to the related incident, any updates from an incident, if the technical staff wishes the end user to see any description from an incident, we do post that out as an activity into the related interactions, so you'll be able to see any comments on the related incidents if you want it set up that way. You know, clicking on that visible customer, that will update the tracking on the interaction side from the related incidents.
And in fact, the end users, if they've been able to fix the problem, can actually type in here, I fixed it by rebooting, right? Then they're able to actually communicate back to even the person that is working on the incident is able to see some of these, these comments that they're able to push back and forth. Although that's obviously on the interaction record. And it's 35 after. It's been great that we've been able to spend some time, and it looks like there's still a lot of people on the line. Chuck, what do you want to do?
Susan, Rocky, I mean, we could go another, we can hang on another 10 minutes.
Yeah, you can keep going, or we could also respond, post written responses, whatever your preference is.
Well, let's go another 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, because most people with a question are still hanging on,
yeah.
Hoping that they get an answer.
Since I'm speaking, there is one thing that is asked about roadmaps, and I would just say, we don't do like broad-based roadmaps in a session like this, or if we do, it's very watered down. But there is, ask your HP account rep, or also, we communicate this with via partners. But there is we have a lot of great things on the roadmap, a lot of things coming soon. So anyhow, it's something to ask your kind of HP account rep for.
So I think we have probably more questions than we can answer in the next 10 minutes. So I would like to challenge HP to take a look through the questions and post answers. There's some very detailed questions about configuration setup. In the spirit of time here, I'd like to ask some questions that probably more broadly apply. The next one is, can you provide any sort of quick overview for licensing model for SRC?
So really quickly to answer that one, there's two different ways. One is obviously the self-service ticketing is absolutely free. Knowledge management if you have the knowledge management module, and then catalog if you have the catalog. Chuck and I worked on a long time ago, but there seems like there's still a lot of lack of knowledge of this. There's an enterprise suite, which essentially is a buffet-style pricing model, which you essentially just do named and floating, and each one of those you get 1,000 end users for all of the activities, knowledge and catalog. And then for the named, and 2,000 per floating. So a much easier option if you were trying to consume it after you already have an initial purchase, which is what everybody on here is. So I'd look at both. I'd look at what would it take, if you're talking to your sales rep, what would it take to do this a la carte, just buying catalog and potentially knowledge, and then see what that cost would be if you utilize the enterprise suite, because it tends to end up pretty favorable.
Right, if you're going to do any kind of capacity upgrade, want some more help desk or change modules, and wanted catalog at the same time, then talk to your HP rep. But as Pat said, the enterprise suite is very generous in the entitlements.
Will newer versions of HP Service Manager have built-in email capability, or will it still require the external application?
This is email integration?
Yes.
Yeah, so in I think it was 9:30, and Casey, you'll have to correct me or not, we have a much better integration with email. Inbound email is essentially the same, but outbound email we've improved dramatically.
Yeah, we introduced the HTML email with 930, so it's another content pack that you can download. It allows you, to basically format your emails using HTML widgets, so which is a lot nicer.
And when Casey says content pack, there's a lot of things we've talked about. HP Live Network. So if you Google that, you'll really quickly get the links to that. Then there's kind of product line pages. So there's a service manager page. I think it's on the second screen. And you'll find like that email content pack. You'll find the process designer. You'll find other things like that. Pat's gonna, or maybe he was gonna bring it up. But
I was going to check, but then I decided we probably don't have enough time. We've got 1 minute.
All right, so we want to wrap up here with the last question. It's about browser support. I think some of us can see that you're using Chrome here for your demo. When will Chrome be supported for IT to work incidents? And I guess if you could just speak in generalities about browser support from a SRC perspective and from the back-end system.
Official Chrome support. Pat, do you want? I know we have a lot of people internally that use Chrome, but
yeah, it's not on the official support, the compatibility matrix. I think it'll make an appearance there because we obviously are working with that in a couple of different places. You see that I'm using Chrome now. So yes, we're looking to get that added to the official compatibility list. What is on the compatibility list is IE and Firefox, IE 9, Firefox 14, I think. We are looking to get Chrome added to the list because obviously we do use it pretty extensively internally, as you can see. Yeah, we are looking to see if we can run this. We are planning on running this quarterly. So anything that you would like to see, we're absolutely happy to oblige, and we'll probably extend this to an hour-and-a-half session and try to keep it useful and interesting. So help us out by giving us some suggestions.
I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today, and would challenge you to help us follow up the questions that we didn't get answered. And with that, I think we'll call it a wrap.
Thanks, Mary Kay.
Thanks.